Robert McCall wakes up early to get ready for his work at home mart. His co-workers appreciate and like him. He sits down to eat lunch with his friend Ralphie. Ralphie bites his sandwich, and McCall hears a crunch. His sandwich has chips. McCall tells Ralphie that he needs to lose weight in preparation for his security guard test. Most nights, McCall goes to a diner with a book. He is now reading The Old Man and the Sea. A young girl in the area asks McCall if the man from the book has caught the fish. He replies, "Not yet." After finishing her pie, the girl goes to call a taxi. McCall's co-workers ask him what he used to do before joining them. He says that he was a pip with Gladys Knight and performed a little dance for them. McCall returns to the diner next night and runs into the same girl. She notices that he's reading a new book. A limo arrives across from the diner. She then receives a call from her pimp Slavi. He informs her that she has a client, who is the man in the limousine. The girl does not want to since the guy is a pig. The automobile door opens, revealing an obese man waiting for the girl. She reluctantly goes outside to join him. The next night, McCall meets the girl in the diner. She has a bruise on her cheek. He brings her a donut from work. She sits at his table and introduces herself as Terry, despite the fact that her real name is Alina. She gives McCall a CD of herself singing. McCall leaves with her and they walk before a car approaches. It's Slavi and his driver, Tavi. Slavi steps out and slaps Alina. McCall takes a step forward until he notices Tavi holding a gun. Slavi approaches McCall and gives him a business card to ask for other girls. McCall returns to the diner another night and learns from the manager that Alina is in ICU after being severely beaten. McCall gets there and sees another prostitute, Mandy, by Alina's side. Her face is significantly more abused and bruised. Mandy walks by McCall in tears. She grabs a cup of coffee, but it overflows. McCall calms her and asks about Alina. Mandy informs him that Slavi hit Alina, she then hit him back and was made an example of. Mandy claims that Slavi also thrown battery acid in a girl's face as an example. He's threatened other girls before. McCall checks the card that Slavi gave him. He moves to an area above a restaurant where Slavi and his guys are gathering. McCall enters carrying an envelope with $9,800 for Alina's freedom. The men firstly laugh at McCall, but Slavi states that the money would be sufficient to keep Alina for 1 month. McCall takes the money and starts to walk away. He almost departs, but instead decides to stay and lock the door. He sets his watch's timer after carefully studying the men and any weapons they may be carrying. One of the men points a gun at McCall, but he grabs the man's arm and shoots Slavi in the neck. He then jabs a shot glass into the man's eye. He stabs the third man, then grabs a corkscrew and repeatedly stabs Tavi until he sticks it under his chin and finishes him out. McCall walks to Slavi's side and sees his slow death. Following the murders, Teddy, a Russian mobster, arrives in Boston to track down the killer. He joins forces with a group of corrupt cops to gather information. At work, McCall notices Ralphie is not present. He is informed that Ralphie has resigned. McCall visits a restaurant where Ralphie's mother works. Ralphie is assisting there after a fire broke out, apparently by accident. One of the corrupt cops, Frank Masters, takes Teddy to the workplace of a gangster named John Looney to continue his search for the killer. John disparages Teddy and all Russians in general. Teddy responds by hitting John with an ashtray, while Frank murders John's bodyguards. Teddy continues to strike John in the face until he passes out. The other 2 corrupt cops, Remar and Peterson, are eating at Ralphie's mother's restaurant. They extort her for money and threaten another accident if the money isn't paid on time again. McCall meets them outside the restaurant and wants to report a crime. They ignore him until he calls one of them directly. McCall shows them a video he recorded of them extorting a convenience store clerk, as well as evidence of their confession to causing the restaurant fire. McCall tells them that they have 2 options, return the money or have the video broadcast on television. The cops have him at gunpoint, but McCall soon beats both of them. They comply and later give the money to Ralphie's mother. McCall is seen playing baseball with his co-workers. Ralphie arrives in a security guard clothes, having passed his test. A thief comes into Home Mart and holds the cashier Jenny at gunpoint until she gives the money in the register. McCall approaches him calmly and hands over the money. The thief also demands Jenny's ring, which belonged to her mother. She hands it to him with tears. McCall observes several aspects of the man, including his tattoos and cap. He doesn't make a move since youngsters are entering the store with their mothers. Instead, McCall follows the men outside and observes his car's plates. The detectives inform them that this was one of several robberies carried out by the same individual. McCall then goes to grab a sledgehammer off a rack. The following day, Jenny discovers her ring in the register. McCall then wipes the hammer clean before returning it to the rack. Teddy learns some information about McCall, the majority of which appears to be accurate, with no indication that he was involved in Slavy's murders. He and Frank, along with another villain, stake out as one of their men attempts to catch McCall at the diner. McCall realizes the men is up to something, so he asks whether they're waiting for anyone else. The man takes out a gun and approaches him. A truck pulls up in front of the diner, blocking Teddy and his friend's view. McCall punches the man in the stomach with his book before killing him by slamming his head down on the table and breaking his neck. He then kills the lights by inserting a knife into an outlet. He comes out of the diner and takes photographs of Teddy and his men in their car. The gangsters follow McCall home. He boils some honey to treat a wound from the gunman. He gets to escape before Teddy and his goons arrive. McCall observes them from another room, using hidden cameras in his residence. Teddy is aware that someone is observing him. McCall visits the home of his friends Brian and Susan Plummer. McCall knows Susan can get some information about Teddy and the people that he works for. While she is out getting what he asked for, Brian informs McCall that he was thought to be dead, but Susan knew the truth. When she returns, she informs McCall that the men he killed were members of the Russian Mafia headed by Vladimir Pushkin. Teddy, whose real name is Nikolai, is the man Pushkin sends when something needs to be done. Remar and Peterson were on Pushkin's payroll, but were discovered dead a few days earlier, their testicles blown off and put down their throats. Susan warns McCall that these men will not stop until he and others he cares about are killed. McCall catches Frank and confines him in his car with a hose to poison him with carbon monoxide until he agrees to help him. Frank relents and takes McCall to a facility where the Russians hide their money. McCall manages to convince all of the gangsters to surrender, and he has them tied up in a room with all of the money for the cops to find before freeing the workers. The police arrive in search of the gangsters and the money, as well as to arrest Frank. McCall then goes to Frank's safety deposit box and collects his money, passport, and a USB drive holding additional information about Pushkin and his dealings. He discovers the oil tankers and bombs them all up. Teddy and his men take home Mart and hold McCall's close friends, including Ralphie and Jenny, hostage until he confronts them. The baddies track his cell phone to see when he arrives. When he fails to appear, they nearly execute one of McCall's co-workers until music begins to play over the intercom. The criminals walk out, and McCall steadily kills them as he travels around the place. He hangs one with barbed wire, stabs another in the neck, and finally blows one up in a microwave with hydrogen. Ralphie goes to help McCall, but he is shot in the leg. McCall assists him in escaping until he is left alone with Teddy after the explosion activates the sprinklers. McCall grabs a nail gun and repeatedly shoots Teddy in the throat, killing him. 3 days later, McCall meets Pushkin in his Moscow house as he is taking a shower. McCall continuously turns on and off the lights and runs the water in the sink. Pushkin approaches the sink and discovers McCall has vanished. He calls his guards, unaware that McCall cut the connections and left them exposed. When the water hits the wires, Pushkin is electrocuted. The other guards were already dead. McCall returns to Boston and gets approached by Alina, who has healed from his wounds. She tells him she has a real job and has begun to read. She praises McCall for what he accomplished and kisses him on the cheek before saying goodbye. The final scene shows McCall working on his laptop at the diner. He receives a message asking for help. He simply answers, yes.